the founder member of the Black Consciousness Movement, Professor Saths Cooper, Steve Biko, will be joining us right now on the program to reflect on the life and times of Steve Biko. Prof, thank you so much for your time this hour. And of course, Prof Biko's death has stood as one of the stark reminders of apartheid brutality. Just what does the reopening of the inquest, first of all, almost half a century later, signify in terms of historical justice and accountability? Let's just get your reactions there.
Well, it shows that there wasn't any justice in this matter, despite entreaties to the contrary from various sources, not only the family, but the TRC made findings in this matter, and that wasn't carried out. And this inquest will probably unfurl all those issues, and it's significant that this was held already in Gqeberha and postponed because they were able to locate two of those incriminated in the atrocities that were committed on Steve Biko. So, and it's that 48th anniversary. So it's a significant day in our history. It's something that ought to have been dealt with much earlier than it was. However, I expect that whoever stood in the way of justice will get their own justice through this process as well.
And Prof, we heard the NPA say its goal is to place evidence before the inquiry that would possibly show that Biko's death involved an offense by an individual. But Prof, let me just say, 48 years later, what does this now mean insofar as justice is concerned, seeing that many have argued that reopening old cases is more about preserving history and not just about accountability? How do you see the role of the processes such as this one of this inquest unfolding in keeping the memory of leaders like Biko alive while also pushing for accountability?
I think both issues do apply here. And a third one is that the terrible death of Steve Biko 48 years ago resounded throughout the world and still resounds, as is evidenced by various media focusing on this day and focusing on the inquest that's about to unfurl. So justice delayed is justice denied, and our democratic system ought to know and do better than it has done to boast that we've got the most liberal democratic constitution in the world and do very little to ensure that the benefits of that constitution are apparent, particularly for serious victims of apartheid like Steve Biko, his family, his colleagues and others, as well as the population at large who are already victims of the degradation of our democracy in many ways. So there needs to be that accountability, and I dare say that many people who may have been responsible directly or indirectly for what happened to Biko must be cowering somewhere because all of this, I hope, will emerge in that court in Gqeberha.
And Prof, you know, Steve Biko's ideas around black consciousness have reshaped how many South Africans think around questions of dignity and liberation. Just now, looking at where we are as a country, I mean, we also celebrated 30 years of democracy just this past year. Looking at where we are as a country today, where do you see his philosophy resonating most strongly?
Well, it doesn't resonate in the public space as it ought to, and that's because we're stuck with narrow partisan politics. We are also stuck with attempts in the past to obliterate his memory. Thankfully, that hasn't succeeded, and even a party that announced itself a few days ago relied on some quotes from Biko. The president who addressed us just now comes from that era. Mandela referred to Steve Biko and the rest of us as the felt fire that swept South Africa. That flame seems to flicker now and then. It hasn't really cottoned on with the bulk of our people because our dignity comes from within. And if we're aware of our selfhood, we will not tolerate any indignity to be perpetuated on ourselves. We won't use demeaning terms for ourselves. Certainly, we won't use the overall catchphrase of non-white. I cannot call you Mkolisi non this camera because I'm not describing you. And to dispatch an entire group, over 90% of the population of this country to a non of another group speaks volumes about our own sense of who we are as individuals and as a collective. Also, there's a unification message in that black consciousness quest. And if we had it now, we wouldn't see our media replete with headlines of the mutilations of ourselves, of others, of horrendous acts we tend to perpetrate against ourselves, because we would know that we are all the same. We're same in terms of our biology, we're same in terms of our need for affirmation. We ought to have the same dignity, the same fullness as a full human being, but we look at ourselves in a diminished fashion and we allow others to perpetuate that. And arguably at this time we are as divided as ever because people haven't gotten over the past. The past is with us in many, many ways, and there hasn't been a serious program to deal with that past. We need to do that from kindergarten level through to other levels in the public space so that people can express, feel free as full human beings, not as expressions of a diminution of others. And the othering, the diminishing of our self-worth ought to be protected more than it is by our courts and our institutions that are paid to protect us against further deterioration in our selfhood. Apartheid was a crime against humanity. We haven't dealt with that. We talked about social cohesion, but we can't reach that social cohesion when we are so many different languages and regard ourselves as languages. I'm not opposed to languages, but you cannot be a language. You cannot be something that somebody else describes. You have to be a full person. That personhood, that quest for belonging in this country is yet to start.
And Prof, just a quick one, just to wrap, to reflect on Biko's legacy. Just a quick one. We literally have 10 seconds for this chat.
Well, Biko's words still resonate. He is with us in all that he's done. Hope we had more like Biko to lead us than those who serve themselves and their pockets. We need the spirit of Biko to live in all of us across this country, rich, poor, black, white, urban, rural.